Well, welcome everybody. Hope everyone's doing well today. This is Ted Pattison from Critical Path Training. What we're here to do is to look at the Common Data Service for apps. We're going to start just with an overview of where the Common Data Service came from. We're also going to talk about, how we're going to create a database to do Common Data Service development. We're going to talk about entities, both standard entities and custom entities. And the other thing about this talk is I'm going to try to ground it in the basis of your solution builder. You're looking to create something that it's not just a one-off in your environment, but you'd like to take what you've done and deliver it to some type of a client site and basically export it from your environment and import it. So we're going to basically look at things in terms of creating solutions from the ground up. Okay, and then what should be the two meatiest topics, or the two last ones, where we drill down on creating model-driven apps, and then also start creating a custom entity to really bring the model-driven app to life. Okay, now what is the Common Data Service? We should think of it as a platform for building business applications. And when we say business applications, anytime we're storing data that has customers or different accounts, and we have invoices, and we basically have people to contact, we have different activities. Now, what the CDS for apps is going to provide for me is a standard database schema. And so this is mainly something that has evolved from Dynamics 365, but there is a common knowledge that's decided that for business databases, we want a table for contacts, we want a table for accounts, we want a table for this, that, and the other thing. So the idea is that if we can put together and all agree upon a common database schema, we can build tons of infrastructure on top of it, because we don't have to worry about what the table names are or what the column names are. Now, they're going to be more than tables that we work with. They're going to be entities. And an entity, you start your thought process by thinking it's a database table. It's got columns. We're going to create rows of data, but it goes far beyond that into being able to add UI. Think of a SQL database table that has forms and views built into it. So that's what we're going to get with entities, is UI components that are just basically associated with it. And then also we can add entity-specific business logic. So by the end of today's webinar, we'll look at business rules and business process flows and see how they factor in. And it's going to give me the ability, once I've created my components, and my components or my entities, have the UI and the business logic built in, creating apps is going to be as simple as assembling by saying, give me that one, and that one. And what you're going to see is you really just have to create a sitemap, because the entity provides all the behavior that's necessary. Now, just looking back over the last 5 or 10 years, Microsoft has acquired many different software companies that have CRMs and ERP systems. And so Microsoft went through the act of taking all those and branding them. And then they've gone through this act of taking all these on-premises products, where people have to install SQL Server on-premise and get things running there. And they're trying now to kind of move it all to the cloud. So while Microsoft has a bunch of customers from things like Great Plains and Navision who don't like the way things are changing, the big changes are that we want to get to a common place. So Microsoft, has a great motivation, for getting all these different pieces of business software and creating a common database schema for them. Now, when you think about the Common Data Service for apps, or the CDSA, it's an infrastructure for basically dealing with these entities, which are database tables, but much more. They're database tables that have associated forms and views, and they also have business logic attached. Now, what happened over the recent past is that Dynamics 365 used to own all the infrastructure. But now what Microsoft has done is they've been working to migrate this infrastructure out of Dynamics 365 and basically put it into the Common Data Service for apps. And now Dynamics 365, without all this infrastructure, is really just a bunch of entities and other logic that runs in the CDSA. Now, what Microsoft is banking on is that apart from people working on Dynamics 365, which have a great motivation to really learn what the CDSA is all about, we also can start creating custom solutions that don't involve Dynamics 365, but are built on top of the Common Data Service for apps. And that is what Microsoft is kind of now branding as the Power Platform. In Power Platform, note the lowercase p, which is very important to the Microsoft people. In marketing, for some reason, that P remains lowercase. Okay, I digress. Now, when you look at the common database model, which is basically the specification behind the common data service that defines, what the schema is, here's a small sampling of what's inside there. Okay, now, what I want to do in just a second is basically show you what's in a brand new CDS database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into PowerApps. I'm going to go up to the Admin Center here. And inside the Admin Center, what we can see is we have a couple different environments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say, give me a new environment. And we'll just call this one the webinar. Where is it going to be? The United States. Notice that I can pick trial or production. Doesn't really matter which one I used, so I'll go ahead and pick production. The idea of a trial is it just doesn't give you the ability to work past 30 days on something. Let's go ahead and choose create inside there. Now it's basically saying, do you want to create a database? So here's the CDS database. I'm going to go through the details of how all this fits together in just a second. I just wanted to start this because it's going to take a couple minutes for the database to be created. So when we kind of catch up on the slides, we'll be able to kind of go back, look in there, and begin working with that. Okay. Now, as we go back here, what I now want to show here is, let's go ahead and create one more. And this is going to be webinar 2. This one is going to be a trial. And what you'll see is that you can only create so many. So they're not going to let you create as many given the account that you have. Okay, now if I open this one up, you can see it's still provisioned in the database. Let's go back to the slides for just a little bit, and then we'll catch up. So what's going to happen is I'm going to create a new database. It's going to have a CDSA schema built in, so there's automatically entities such as account and contact and activity and task. Now, this is not all the ones that we have, inside of the common data service. It's just kind of a small sampling. You have things like account and contact, and those are basically for businesses and for humans, and together they're often referred to as customer entities. You have activity, which has a start and end date. You have task, email. There's one very special entity which is called user. So users are the actual authenticated users that are using the system. One other little note is that you can't work with just an Office 365 license. You either have to have a Dynamics 365 license or one of the PowerApps Plan 2 or Plan 1 licenses. So just to be seen as a user, you have to get some special licensing. We'll talk about that in just a second. Now, the last thing I want to do in this intro section is just kind of show if here's kind of the set of entities that come out of the box with the CDS. So any type of solution you build on it will use these. What if you were also using Dynamics 365? So just like you can build custom entities, the Dynamics 365 team has built entities. And you can see for things like sales, they have entities for the sales territory, sales leads, opportunities, quotes, invoices, orders. They have those for product, price list, discount. For things like lawyers and IT departments, they have case and case resolution. Okay. Now, what you need to do is to create a common data service for apps database if you want to start playing around with this stuff. Now, one thing you can do, and one of the things that we do in most of our training courses, is we have our students create an Office 365 E5 trial to begin with. Now, the idea of that is that you'll have an environment. It's only good for 30 days, so that's the downside. But the upside is you can add up to 25 users and give them all Office E5 licenses, but that's not quite enough. Now, if I go back here, so let me go ahead and I'm going to move back to the Microsoft Admin Center. And the idea is that, once you have created a new trial account and you have the ability to kind of move around inside the Microsoft Admin Center inside here, let me make sure I'm on as the right user. If I now kind of go back and we start looking at my active users, I can see that with all my different active users right here, let's go back here, I've created trial plans, for both PowerApps Plan 1 and PowerApps Plan 2. So if you want to be able to create model-driven apps and you want to be able to edit and create entities, you need Plan 2. If you're just a user who's using the CDS, maybe through a Canvas-driven app, you need Plan 1. And then it turns out that if you're using model-driven apps, everybody needs a Plan 2 license. So just to kind of step through and kind of show you that, you do need to kind of set those up, and you can simply go down, into the purchase services and find the PowerApps Plan 1 and Plan 2 and get 90-day trial licenses, so you can set up this environment. Okay, now once you've done that, got the Plan 2 license, what is an environment? So the idea of an environment is that it's a container for the Canvas apps and flows, and it's also a container for the CDS database. And an environment can hold 1 or 0 CDS databases. You can't put multiple CDS databases, inside an environment. Now, note that if you are the tenant admin, or at least if you're the Dynamics 365 administrator, and you have the PowerApps Plan 2 license, or the equivalent Dynamics 365 licensing, you will be able to see and add new environments. So generally, you need to give yourself at least the trial PowerApps Plan 2 license just to be able to kind of work at this level. Now, also note that when you create the environments, you have the environment admin role, so you can make others the admin of an environment, and you can put others in the maker role. Okay. Now, you kind of saw the steps. I basically create the new environment. Do you want to create an environment? Yes, I do. Also note that when you create the environment, you have to specify, things like currency is in US dollars and the language is US English. One other thing I want to point out is that when you create the environment, you can basically choose this, and this actually gets to be something that you should pay attention to whether you're picking this or not. So if you include this, it's going to add some sample data into contacts and accounts, but it also is going to create some custom entities. So Dynamics 365 has a product entity, and if you don't get Dynamics 365, you don't get a product entity. But if you add sample data, they add a sample product entity inside there, and they also add a couple model-driven apps. So don't create all your environments with sample data, but at least create one and kind of check out the model-driven apps that they give you inside there. Okay, now once you're done and you've created your environment inside here, let's say we go back here, we should have our environment, and I'm now going to go back just to the PowerApps portal, which is just at web.powerapps.com. And what I should be able to do is move back and forth between the different environments. Okay, any second now, my screen should liven up here. What you can see here is that now I can move over to webinar. And so now we can, thanks for the feedback that you can hear me fine. Now what we're able to do is we're in the right place. So if I go down to entities, I should be able to see the entities that are inside here. So if I go down here and I kind of take a look at some of those, note that I can also do things like say custom, just show me the custom ones. And you would think that would be empty, but they add a couple things that are seen as custom. I can also list all. If I list all and then I list group, here you can see, every single entity that comes out of the box with the CDSA. Okay, now let's say that I go down into master, and here are the two important ones that represent customers, accounts, and contacts. Now, if I drill into contacts, what you can see here is that there is a set of fields. And, what's interesting about the CDSA is that over years, the collective wisdom has told us that we need 1 and 2 and 3 addresses, but no 4th address. So the collective wisdom is 2 addresses is far too few, 4 is 4 too many, 3 addresses is the exact right number. Okay, so now that I've been a little bit silly here, let's go ahead and create our first app. So we're here to talk about model-driven apps, but let's do my first demo just by building a Canvas app. So I'm going to build a Canvas app. And what I want to do is basically talk to that contacts entity inside there. So notice that there's a choice for Common Data Service. And now I'm going to go ahead and choose Create. Microsoft is in the process of continually refining this connector for Canvas apps. But what we'll do is let's go down here. And I want to find contact, so if I scroll down far enough, there is contacts inside there. Let's go ahead and connect. And so if you've used these Canvas apps to connect to SharePoint or to connect to Azure SQL, you should feel right at home right here. Now, once we're kind of done with this, you can see that I have my traditional 3-screen app inside here. If I go to the Browse screen, and we go down here, it's looking at contacts. Let's go ahead and look at fields. Maybe we want to do something simple here. Let's just kind of keep it with the title. Okay, and then what am I going to choose? And what's kind of nice is that with the CDS, I don't have to worry about taking first name and last name, put them together, because they already include something that's kind of like a calculated column, which is full name. Okay, great. Now let's go to the edit screen. So once I go to this edit screen, and let's go ahead and bring up the edit form inside here, and we'll click on Edit Fields. So here I don't need all of these inside here. Just to make the demo go a little bit quickly, I'm going to remove just about everything inside here, except for first name, and we'll put in last name, just so we can do the hello world and put 1 or 2 records inside of the CDS database in my first demo. Okay, so if I go down here and I finally find last name, and let's go ahead and choose Add. Okay, so now let's go ahead and test out this Canvas app by running it. No contacts yet. It's a brand new CDS database. Let's go ahead and have my friend Chuck inside there, and I guess I better spell Chuck's name correctly, and Sterling. And now we'll go ahead and choose OK. And now what we should see is that after a second, the page refreshes. I put my first record inside there. Okay, this is not a talk about Canvas apps, so let's get the Canvas app the heck out of the way. But now let's go back, into the entities that I was just working with. Let's go back into contacts right here. And if I go to the very end, what we should be able to verify is that, there is indeed, some data that's been put, inside there. The next thing I want to talk about is if you're going to start building real solutions, on top of the Common Data Service, you have to embrace the idea that you are a publisher of solutions. So what Microsoft is going to recommend is that, here I am, inside of my new environment. And so if I drop down Advanced Customizations, let's go ahead and drop that down, there is a link to get to all publishers. So the idea of publishers are the ones that are creating solutions. So if you want to be able to export a zip package, which is your solution, and push it somewhere else, you need to have your own publisher profile. So here, we're going to go ahead and click on New, and we're going to quickly add a new publisher profile. So let's say we have Critical Path Training inside there. What's the name? I'm going to just give it a short name of CPT. And there's also something important which is known as the prefix. And we're going to see where that comes into play in just a second. So let's go ahead and do a save and close. And so now I've created my own publisher. It's got the prefix. Microsoft is also recommending that you go to the CDS default publisher, and you take that and you change its prefix to have the same prefix as your publisher inside there. Okay, so now we've created a publisher. So now back here, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Solutions. Everything I'm going to do as far as creating custom entities and model-driven apps, I want to be able to package up, export as a solution. So we're going to go and create a new solution. So up here, this will be something such as the Critical Path CDSA demo, and I then pick a publisher, Critical Path Training. I then pick a version number, and note it likes version numbers like .NET Let's say if I'm not ready to ship, maybe I'll give it a 0 major number and a 1 minor number. Let's go ahead and choose create. And now I've created a solution. Okay, let's go ahead and close this advanced customization pane. And let's now drill into the solution. So as I drill into the solution, notice that there's nothing there because it's brand new. But as I drop down the new button, well, I can create a new Canvas app. I can create a new model-driven app. Okay, there's other things I could create, such as if I created a solution, one of the things that generally we need to worry about is what access people have to the different things inside there. So I could do something such as add a security role. And, maybe this is going to be something like, product managers. And now what I'm able to do is I'm able to go down in a very granular basis and dictate, which particular entities that users within this role have access to. And, one of the important things here, I'm just adding one particular element, into this particular solution, but you're not just going to be adding entities and model-driven apps. You're going to be adding a bunch of different things, including the roles that basically define your security model. Okay, so now that we've had kind of a quick look at, adding a new profile for you as a publisher and making sure you know the prefix, and then we've created a new solution, and you kind of saw that process, and now it's simply adding components into our solution. And the first example I showed you, was working with CDSA security roles inside there. Okay. Now, there's also this thing called the Solution Explorer. And the reason that the Solution Explorer is important is that it is basically the old user interface from Dynamics 365. So it's very much a work in progress, but sometimes we go there because there's no other way to do something than by going to this Solution Explorer. Okay, and we're going to see one example of that a little bit later. Okay, so let's keep going through some more slides. Now, let's finally build a model-driven app. So the key benefits to building a model-driven app is that there's no coding. You're not even writing expressions like you would inside of a Canvas app. The idea is you're just assembling and you're saying, give me that entity and that entity, click a couple of buttons, and the app is up and running. Okay, so another big nice thing about this is that we're going to create apps that use something which is called the Microsoft Unified Interface. So not only does it look good, but it's immediately accessible to both, full screen browser and form factors as well. So it has a really good responsive design. And if people are using Dynamics 365, they get used to a certain interface, and you're going to be serving up apps that have the exact same interface paradigm. Okay. And once again, it's automatically responsive, and it gives you a great way to, build solutions that have your custom entities and the apps, in basically a single package to distribute and, perform ALM on. Okay, so what are the steps? Well, figure out what CDSA entities you want. In fact, too much talking here. Let's do more demos. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back, into our solution. So now get out of the habit of, creating apps just kind of in the space without putting them explicitly into a solution, unless you're just playing around. But as you start building things, we're going to go back into our solution, and now we're going to drop this down, and we're going to say, give me my first model-driven app. So with this app, let's say that I want to have something like, the customer manager. And so let's use the two built-in entities, account and contact. So we'll go ahead and we'll say done. And so here's your starting point. Now the first thing you have to do is configure something which is the sitemap. So while you're not going to do much other than point to entities, the way that you point to which entities you want to use is by adding them into your sitemap, or think of it as your global navigation. So I'm going to click on the pen, and we're going to move into the editing mode. Now here you have an area, and just to kind of emphasize something, I'm going to call this Ted's app, and you're going to basically see this inside the UI. So I just want to change these. Okay, next you have a group, so maybe I'll call this something like data entry, and now you have a sub area, and the sub area is where I come over here to the other side, properties, and I'm going to say I want this to navigate to an entity. Which entity? we're going to use the built-in account entity. Great. And pretty much that's all I have to do if I have a simple scenario. Let's go ahead and add a second entity inside there. So we're going to add a second sub area. We're going to come back over here and we're going to say, let me add another entity. A field is required. And so here, we're going to pick that contact entity inside there. Okay, now the thing that gets everybody in trouble is they forget to publish. So there's two things here. There is the sitemap and the app. With both, you have to go through the save then publish. So I'm still in the sitemap, so I'm going to click on the save button. Now I click on the publish button. Once I publish the sitemap, let's go ahead and navigate back to the app. And back in the app, I'm going to go ahead and choose save. I'm going to go ahead and choose publish. And now let's go ahead and run the app inside here. Okay, so now we run the app. Let's look at the navigation up top here. See, that used to be called group, and now it's Ted's app. And then I have the thing I'm looking at, accounts or contacts. So what you can see is that they're able to, build a sitemap that allows you to get to these two different things. Now, let's say that I have a new account that I want to add. Okay, so my new account name, I've landed the whale, Microsoft Corporation. What's the phone? Great. Who is the primary contact? If we go back over here, hey, there's Chuck Sterling. He's one of my contacts inside here. So, another nice thing about the way that these work is let's go ahead and now move to contacts. Let's add a new contact in here. So now I'll add another one of my good Microsoft buddies, Bob German. And note when I come down to account, you're going to be able to look things up inside there. Let's go ahead and hit save. So, what you've seen is it's pretty easy to get up and going. There's no UI that I had to really build. And let's also look at the experience, as my screen, gets smaller and smaller, and finally smaller instead, so once again, they have this user interface experience, that automatically brings to the table a very, professional, stylish, responsive design. So that's one of the big ticket items. Let me once again remind you of the pricing here. So if you just want to create custom entities, you have to have the Plan 2 license and all your, let's say let me take that back. If you want to use the CDS and people are going to access the CDS through Canvas apps, you need the Plan 2 license. All your users need the Plan 1 license. So to touch the CDS database, users need the CDS, Plan 1. However, when you start using model-driven apps, that's the big ticket item. Everybody needs the Plan 2 license. So you're basically moving your users from $7 a month up to $40 a month, to be able to push things out with model-driven apps. And it's important that you understand that pricing going in. Note that if you have any of the Dynamics 365 licensing for a user, you have what you need automatically. It's just if you have Office licensing, you need a lot of extra compared to Dynamics 365 licensing, where you have all you need that's built in. Okay, so now we can start getting into some of the fun stuff. I just basically showed you how to build a simple model-driven app, and we didn't really do anything. We just kind of pointed to some of the standard entities that come out of the box. So now what we'd like to do for the rest of the webinar is start creating our own custom entity and showing, what things are great, what are the things you don't get for free you have to add inside there. Okay, so remember exactly, what a custom entity is. It's a database table plus a lot more. So as far as a database table goes, an entity has a set of fields. When we have fields, we can have things like option sets, and also you can define relationships between different entities. You can see that there is a relationship between accounts and contacts, which made it easy for me, to create something and associate the other side with the relationship. It's amazing if you did something like you had a students table and a registration table and you have a many-to-many, they automatically will create the bridge table behind the scenes and just create a very easy, user interface experience, to basically register students into a particular class. Now, in addition to the data components, there's forms and views. And what we're going to see is that there's a new set of designers for forms and views. So we're kind of moving from the dark ages of Dynamics 365, things that were created years back, and kind of replacing them with things that are, far more in line with kind of the PowerApps building experience. There's also logic components. So we're going to see, building business rules and business process flows. And we're also in a transition period where Dynamics 365 has had its own workflow layer, and now it's kind of being replaced with Microsoft Flow. And now Microsoft is throwing out really confusing terms like the classic CDS workflow experience, and CDSA is only a year old. How could I have a classic experience? They're talking about, what's being brought ahead from Dynamics 365. So we need backwards support, for things that are being brought ahead. But as we move forward, when you build things from the ground up, it's going to be a lot cleaner because you're going to use all the new pieces and not have to worry about some of the, the legacy baggage, that Microsoft is trying to migrate from, to something that really is kind of built, completely on PowerApps and Flow. Okay, now when I create a custom entity, let's go back here. And so what I'm going to do, let's go ahead and close down a couple of these forms right here. And when I want to create my custom entity, let's head back to PowerApps here. And what we first need to do is add some fields. So let's say that we finally get back to the screen we need to go to. Okay, once I've gotten there, let's make sure we're at the right place. Webinar, great. Let's go down to data. Let's go down to entities, and I'm going to create a new entity. Okay, now when I create this entity, I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Acme product inside here. And notice that I don't get my prefix under there. Why is that? Ted, you're not doing it in the right place. You need to go back to your solution. Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you for reminding me. So let's go back into our solution. Now we'll go ahead and pick entity. And so now what we're going to be able to do is create Acme product. And note that, as you create these inside, entities should have a singular name. They will automatically fill in the display name for plural for the set. But if you have something like attorney and attorneys, you might have to fill something inside. You have something that we can either enable or disable attachments. Let's go ahead and choose next. Okay, now, first thing that we're going to see is that there is a field added automatically called primary name. They want one text field that if they have to show you any column in a record for a user to quickly get a sense of what that is, it's going to be the primary name. Now, you can't really change or get rid of this column, but you can change its display name. So let's go up there, and we're going to rename this to product name. Okay, so now that we have renamed this to product name, let's go ahead and choose done. And let's go ahead and add a couple more fields. So let's say that we want a product description. And note that I can add in the spaces inside here, and it works out behind the scenes how to make names that are valid. This is going to be multi-line text. Let's go ahead and choose done. Let's go ahead and next we will put in list price, and note that we have a currency field. And remember that when the database gets created, you had to specify US dollars or some other type of money, and it has facilities built in to make it really easy to convert between different types of currency. Another big benefit of using this. Okay, now let's say that we want to add two more things. Let's say that we want to have a product SKU. So when we ship our product, we know what that is. That's just going to be simple text. Great. And then finally, let's go ahead and add in something that's a drop-down list. We want a choice. So we're going to create product category. And so with product category, I'm going to pick multi-select option set. So the idea of an option set is that it's a top-level component, just like an entity. And when you create an option set, you can use it across multiple entities. And there's many built-in option sets. Here, we're going to create one on our own because they don't have one that matches what I need. Product category, and the first option is going to be action figures. And the second item is going to be arts and crafts. And then the third item is going to be remote control. Okay, now let's go ahead and click on Save. Let's go ahead and click on Done. And note that nothing has been saved yet. I'm just basically creating this entity. So now let's go ahead and click on Save Entity. Now, let's go back to the slides for a second and just kind of step through what I just did. So I called New on Entity. We created that. Because we created it in a solution, the prefix on everything I'm creating, is going to be CPT and not the arbitrary one that they add in there for you. And I basically showed you creating the entity, adding the fields. We can either pre-create the option sets, then add them in, or we can just create option sets on the fly. And what I'm not going to have time to demo, is how you would create relationships between entities and take advantage of them. Okay, but those are the considerations. You kind of saw that there was a primary name, that often you'll give a different name to. You're going to add in different fields, and you're going to build the schema, as far as the fields go for your entity. Now, note that if I go back here, and we now say, don't just show me the simple ones, but show me everything, what you can see here is that when you create a custom entity, if your entity is named product, they're going to add a field named product, which creates a GUID. So just remember, you can't have a column that's the same name as the entity, because that's the column they'll create for the GUID, which is the unique identifier. You have your typical created by, created on, modified by, modified on. Another big thing with the Common Data Service is that records have owners. And owners can be individual users, or they can be teams. So if you want the sales team to own a record, or you can even have business units, which is kind of a higher level or the top level scope of ownership inside there. Okay, and then a whole bunch of other things like status, whether something's active, what's the version number inside there. Now, let's go back to the UI components. So you have the app, and that's a top level collection of components, great. You have the sitemap, and you've seen me create a sitemap, but what you haven't now seen is working with the forms and views. So let's go ahead, and I've created this custom entity. So now what we want to be able to do is let's go ahead and build something on top of that. So back here in my solution, what we'd like to be able to do is to build a new model-driven app. And this is going to be something like the product manager. And as I build this new app, we'll keep it real simple here. And up here, we're going to say, this is going to be the product MGR. This is the data entry menu here. And then we'll go to the sub area. What do I want? I want a entity. There is the Acme product. Acme product is always a nice demo because it shows up right at the top of the list. Okay, so let's go through the drill. Save and publish for the sitemap. Let's go ahead and close. And now let's go ahead and do a save and publish for the app itself. And now let's go ahead and click on play. Okay, so now here's my Acme products. Great. Let's go ahead and add a new product, and all I get is product name. So what you're going to see is that the views and forms, aren't really ready to use if you have a custom entity. So back here in the designer, let's go to forms. And so one of the things that they've done lately is to make it really easy to get to these forms. So do you want to show all or just the main form? Let's go ahead and click on the little pen right there. And so here is the new form design experience. So what I'd like to be able to do, is let's say that when we create this, we're going to add in, what is the product category, what is the list price inside here. Let's go ahead and put the product SKU down inside there. Great. And let's go ahead and put the product description. And product description, I might want a little bit more. What's a little bit tricky is you have to kind of click on product description. And then up here, I'm going to choose change properties. And so there's this whole world. And once again, a lot of this is a UI experience that they're moving forward from Dynamics 365 and kind of changing it into the PowerApps shell. But one of the things that we should be able to do here is, let's go ahead and click on that. Let's go ahead and choose change properties. If I go over to formatting, and now I'm going to say, give me 5 lines inside there. Okay, now that I've done that, let's go ahead and save. But it's more than save. If you want to test your changes, you have to click on publish. So it's not like Canvas apps, where you can be testing things out, pre-publishing. Let's go ahead and do a save and close. Let's now, before we go and test it out, let's go over to views. And so there's a bunch of views that they created, and the one that they're going to start up is the Acme Active Products view. Let's go ahead and click on that. And so once again, if I come back here, I can say, we don't want that particular column inside there. Let's go ahead and remove that. If I go back over to components and we look for the primary attributes, what we'd like to do is we'd like to see the list price. We'd like to go ahead and see the product category and the product SKU. And now that we've done that, it's over here on the right now. So remember, we're in a transition period. What I'm showing you here, is changing, and we'll definitely see a lot of evolution through the end of the April updates. Let's go ahead and click Save. Let's go ahead and click Publish. Let's go ahead and save and close. Okay, so now save and close, and now that I have done that, let's go back to our app and test it out. And let's go ahead and choose Play. And now what we're going to do is create, and here's now our product. So first one, we have product 1. Okay, and what is the category that we're in? Let's go ahead and pick one of these. And here I probably should have just picked a single. I picked multi-check. But let's go ahead and fill that in. Let's fill in the product SKU. Let's go ahead and add a description. Let's go ahead and hit save. Okay, and now that I've done that, let's go ahead and move back to Acme Products. And you can kind of see, I can start building out my UI. Okay, so now we're kind of in the home stretch. So we've created a entity, and then we basically created the app around it, and we created a sitemap. Remember, the sitemap is an entity unto itself. So that sitemap can be, something that's not really part of the app, but is assembled by the app. You have the form and the view. So now we're going to look at logic components. And so we have 2 that I'm going to show, business rules and business process flows. We also have the older style workflow, and then we have actions and flows. And I'm not going to show the last 3 because we're still going through a transition period. But I think the first 2, I can show you demos, and it will make sense, what we can use these for. Okay, so let's say that we go back. And what we now want to do is we want to change some business rules, some of the logic behind. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and go back to our entity. So there's the entity, Acme Products. And we're going to go to business rules. And under business rules, I'm going to say add a business rule. Now, business rules can be really complex. So we're going to do something very simple that we can just do in a couple minutes. And so we start with a condition. And so what this condition would be, no SKU or SKU without list price. So the idea is I don't want someone setting the product SKU until they set the list price. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some rules. So we'll say entity, and let's say if the list price, and what is the list price, if it does not contain data, and we're going to and that together with another rule. So we're going to choose and for the second one, it is going to be, but the product SKU does contain data. Okay, so once we've got that, let's go ahead and hit apply. SKU without list price. So if that's true, what do we want to have happen? So notice that there's a tab for components. And the idea of the component is if this is true, we want something to happen, and I want to show an error message. So let's go ahead and drop this inside here. So what we're going to have is SKU without price error. And now that we have that in, we're going to have a field. So this is going to show up on one of those particular fields. Let's go ahead and choose apply. Okay, now I chose apply. And so now I'm going to choose save and have it entered a value. That's right. So the last thing I need to do here is say SKU cannot be added without list price. Let's go ahead, choose apply. Let's go ahead and save. And so now we have to do something that's kind of like publishing, but we're kind of bringing something forward from Dynamics 365 where they always used to call it activate. You know, this is server-side logic. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the activate button inside here. And now we're going to go through this activation process. Now that we're activated, let's go ahead and test things out. So let's go back to our app. So we'll find the product manager. We'll go ahead and set this up. You know, and there is product 1. Let's go ahead and now we'll add product 2. And let's say that we set a thing, and won't touch list price, you know, but we'll set that product SKU, and we'll go ahead and click save. And so what you can see here is SKU cannot be added. So you have things that are business rules that can set a default value, or they can basically lock out field A until field B has been filled in. Or it could say that certain values aren't allowed in field B while field A is set to a certain value. So you get lots of flexibility inside. Okay, now we've saved the best for last. The last thing that we want to do is step through how to build a business process flow. Now, step 1 is a little bit tricky. What we're going to do is we're going to say, go to flows, and under process flows, we're going to click on new. And what you are able to do is you're able to add a common data service entity, and it's going to take a second for that to fill in. But what you're going to see is at first, your entity won't be available. Now, as I mentioned, we're kind of in a transition period, but what I have to do is kind of use the old UI to flip a switch. So I'm going to go and say, let's enter classic mode. Let's now drill into my solution and look at the option explorer. So now when I go to entities, I can see the product entity. I'm going to click on this. And now that I have clicked on that, there is something which is the business process flow fields, and fields have to be created. So we're going to go ahead and save. And now we've saved, we're going to go ahead and publish. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go back. Got a lot of windows open. So they're going to hopefully soon, you know, give me a way, you know, as I open a solution, you know, to basically add it from inside here. You know, if I go back here to processes, coming soon, switch to classic mode. But let's go down to flows. Let's go to business process flows. Let's go ahead and choose new. And so this is going to be, I'm going to call this product ALM. And now we'll drop this down, and there's Acme product. Okay, so let's go ahead and choose next. So once again, you're in this designer that has components and properties, and you have stages. So what you're going to be able to do is define some type of a logic so your users can create new records and kind of bring them through a life cycle. So let's say that for products, and we'll have a couple different things. We'll have the prototype stage. Okay, so there's one stage I've added. Let's go to components. Let's create a second stage. And let's say that this one is going to be development. Let's go ahead and choose apply. Let's go back to components, and we'll add one more stage. You know, and this is going to be the RTM, release to manufacturing. Okay, and if we want, we can put these, you know, in different categories. Doesn't really matter for this demo. But now what we can do is in each stage, we can have things like data entry steps. So in step 1, what do we need people to enter? The product name, and let's go ahead and choose apply. And then you're going to have to get used to this designer, because now here's another data step. Let's kind of take that and drop it into this very small hole. And now we'll go ahead and have the product description. Okay, now that we've done that, what are we going to do at this next data step right here? Let's kind of keep going through and, say here, description again, so maybe we'll have, instead of adding it in, we'll say review product description. Okay. And then, when it's finally time to go to RTM, we want someone to be able to set the price. So let's go ahead and take list price. Let's go ahead and add one more data step inside there. And if I can somehow get it inside, this one is going to be the product SKU. And let's go ahead and choose apply. Okay, so now I choose apply, and we're going to choose save, and we're going to choose activate. And what is the error? I must have forgotten to put something inside there. So it is list price. Let's go ahead and choose the step. Okay, so it looks like I got about 4 minutes to complete the demo before the end of the hour. Should give me just enough time. I'm going to go ahead and click on validate. Great. And now we need to activate it before we can test it. Here's one of those things where I found that sometimes I wait here for 15 minutes and then I go back and it works just fine. So once again, this might be a dialog that just doesn't come back even though it's fine. But let's go ahead and test out what we've done. So we'll go back to solutions. We'll open this thing up. We'll go back to our product manager model-driven app, and we'll go ahead and start it up. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create a new product. And what we could see here is that my business process flow, allows me to say I'm in the prototyping phase. Let's go ahead and click here. What do we want to do in the prototyping phase? Put in the product name and Batman figure. Forgive my typing. And then the second thing, what is the description inside here? Once we've got that, we can move to the next phase. Do you want to put in a better review? Finally we get to RTM when someone's going to put in the list price, and then someone is going to put in the product SKU. And, at this point, we've kind of been through all the different stages. We can go ahead and choose OK. And, we've basically been through the life cycle, of a business process flow. Okay, so once again, that's just a very introductory look at what we can do here. But as far as the logical components, business rules and business process flows won't change that much. We'll still be supporting the legacy workflow that's being brought forward from Dynamics 365 just because there's so much legacy work that already includes that. And then there'll be, changes to make flow, the primary way that you add logic, to the entities in your CDS solutions. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this hour, just having this initial look at working with the Common Data Service and some of the things that it can do. Let me once again kind of point out, if you're interested in drilling down more on this, come check out our new course at criticalpathtraining.com. Also, if there's anybody that would like to give this presentation to a local user group, please reach out to me. I love advocating CDS and love helping people. So I would definitely work with you to get you the slides and get you up to speed on the demos, just so we can start spreading the news about how this works.